Well, today I'm joined by Sloan Newman, who's the Manager, ABM Programs America at NTT Data. Sloan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been paying a lot of attention to a lot of your previous interviews, and I'm very happy to be included in this. I'm very happy to be talking about this today.
Well, it's great to have you, Sloan. So I think we'll kick off with a question. Actually, we were chatting previously to this recording, and I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and what struck me was the kind of very interesting and varied career, both educational and also the work that led you and brought you to where you are today. So could you give us a little bit of a kind of a summary of your kind of the journey that you've been on to become an ABMer?
Yeah, no, that's I'm happy to. So as I started off in public relations as a young kid, and I was lucky enough that I got a national publication when I was in college, and that interested me a lot, which led me down the path of marketing, and worked in there for a little while, and then went back to grad school in about 2006 while Bev Burgess, which I know you've mentioned before, was coining the term ABM. I was studying around the ideas of attitude towards segmentation audiences and podcast advertising, stealing some ideas from Colin Anderson, stealing some ideas from Kevin Roberts at Saatchi & Saatchi's Love Marks, and basically fell into this idea that better segmentations of audiences led to better interactions and better long-term results on whatever you do across your marketing or endeavors. That fast forward to working agencies for a number of years, and then as an account manager and moving in-house in both after leaving Europe and in the Americas. I ended up at NTT, where I would do the marketing around a different division. And then probably about 3 years ago, I was contacted by Jen Robinson, who was building the ABM division for the Americas underneath the CMO. And we got on a phone call and we started talking, and she's like, you have a lot of insights about how you see these audiences at that smaller scale in such a way that I haven't talked to a lot of marketers, because everybody else is more like, how many leads can I put into the top of the funnel? And so she brought me in about 2.5 years ago. I did a course with Bev not long after I started on the team. And we built out an entire sort of division around a lot of the principles of Inflexion, which is her company. And and that's where we've been. And that's sort of like how we've been doing that ever since. And it's been great. It's been really eye-opening, and it's given me an opportunity to enjoy something that I already enjoyed doing before.
Fantastic. And it's interesting you talk about segmentation a lot there and accounts, which I think we'll dive into a little bit more. But you touched on there, Sloan, the fact that you were brought in, or you were already within the NTT Data, divisions and structure, but they brought you in and asked you to look after the ABM program. Just a couple of questions about that, really. One is kind of, what was the pain, do you think, that they were seeing back then that kind of led them to talk to you about that? So what was the pain? And perhaps then from that pain, what were you tasked with kind of launching at the outset?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I guess the pain was probably for about a year prior to me starting in this role. We had been trying to get traction underneath what we were doing around this idea of, we call it account-based management as opposed to account-based marketing, to simply really sort of step away from just being classified as marketing, because a lot of what we do sort of varies in the teams that we work with. Mm. And I think we were just seeing a lot of these sort of issues from a COE's perspective. We were creating a really nice model of how to do this, but then the execution on the ground level was difficult. So you just needed to find somebody who could embed themselves with the account teams, that could have the empathy to understand the pain points that sales needed to understand, that they would understand that you understood their needs and were able to adapt your pieces for them. Now, when I say ABM, I'm talking about like the one-to-few or the one-to-one, and primarily the one-to-one side of things, where you spend a lot more of that time with the account team. But I think that they saw that, and when they brought me in and we sort of talked about it, I was very intrigued by that idea of being able to, like, how do you message to an account that you already sort of know, and how do you build that portfolio with them, and how do you really create that long-term relationship, and it's not just something that you're going through those short steps with it. So when we sort of talked about it, that's how it was proposed to me that they wanted me to approach this. And so what we did is we basically took a lot of the findings from Inflexion, from Bev's teachings around, her 3 R's, reputation, relationship, and revenue. And then we expanded on that by building out a very regionalized, personalized to each account's campaigns on the one-to-one side, and then a little bit more verticalized for the one-to-few side.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into the program now that you've mentioned it. Can you share with the audience a little bit more about the program? You've mentioned one-to-one and one-to-few. What kind of accounts you're looking to target without giving too much away, and perhaps what the objective is in terms of, is it new logo, is it existing customers, is it growth, is it advocacy? Just a little bit of if you can paint a picture a little bit of what the program looks like.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this, so I'll be more than happy to try and I'll keep it as high level as I can for us. But on the one-to-few side, the easiest way to explain that is creating a number of different pieces of collateral and other pieces that are more verticalized around specific industries and things of that nature, and really creating a nurturing program that can be a little bit more generic, but also will help to hopefully and ideally feed that one-to-one vein. Now, in our case, I started off on doing the one-to-one side, and we kind of then went backwards to do the one-to-few by taking sort of what we had created at that very high level, that personalization message of that. Here's an account based on the 80-20 rule, right? So, and for anybody who doesn't know, that's just 80% of your business is done by 20% of your audience. So understanding who that audience is and saying, okay, we have this audience and we really want to work with this audience. And what do we do to do that? How do we create, for lack of a better word, a white glove experience with that account, or that client or that customer, whatever terminology you want to use for that. And being able to bring it to a level where it doesn't feel marketing, it doesn't feel salesy. So, we had to do a lot of A/B testing. We had to look at a lot of things. Our clients and our audience at that C-suite level that we were looking to target and build out that the relationship and the revenue option around, they didn't want to be messaged to so much. They wanted to have somebody who comes to them with the idea of outcomes or solutions. So we actually started building, and that was us. We listened to the account team of what they needed first, right? I didn't come in and say, hey, I'm here, I'm your marketing guy, I'm here for this one account, and I'm gonna tell you how to do the stuff. Instead, we had a process that we created where, and we do this as well with the one-to-few, where there's a lot of preliminary meetings. We qualify the account first, but of course, after that qualification process and we've selected them, we actually have a sit down, just informal conversation with the account team. To hear them, to see what they want, to understand their needs, and then we build on from that basic understanding. And we work with partners to develop pillars of messaging and all of those things, and then create that collateral that just doesn't feel super. It does feel white glove. It does not, like, we strip down some things so that it feels like it's really coming from the client manager, and we put some of that offering into their hands. I know that's one of those things that some marketers sometimes balk at, the idea of, oh, well, we're going to work really closely, or sales they don't really care about the marketing and stuff. But that's not what we found. Like, we found that every one of the account teams we've engaged with are massively, I guess, what is the book, the closer mentality, the closer sales mentality. Every one of these account team leads have been of that mentality. Like, they challenge me. They come up with, just as intelligent ideas of what that we can do to promote this in this sort of piece than I come up with. So it's amazing to work with these people too.
So, so with regards to the program you have there, obviously one to one, and I think you've got a few accounts in the one to one motion, and several in the one to few. Is that the case?
So we have several dozen in the one-to-one across the globe. So and
Mm.
that's very much led by our Rachel Bell, our COE VP, who is the cornerstone of all of this. She's very bright and she keeps us all motivated. But but yeah, we have several dozen, and then in the verticals, it can range depending. We try to go again. A lot of what we do is that textbook concept of what ABM is of trying not to keep more than 20 to 30 accounts at the most in a one to few vertical. Now, you can create a global version of that where you have, but each region would only have about 15 to 20, and trying to um, really target down, right? Like you have almost a vertical and then a sub vertical of what you're looking at. So if you're speaking about something like healthcare, you might have healthcare, but then you might have like a nursing hospital side and a pharmaceutical side type of thing. So we try to go as deep as we can with being aware of costs and all of those things. And one of the reasons it's kind of worked for us going backwards is Matt Presson, the CMO, Pression, I never say his last name right, um, created this concept in our minds of that we would lift and shift a lot of things. So if we create something for one account for a one-to-one, part of my job is to look at that and say, okay, now how am I going to take what we're doing here and be able to transpose that to a one to few down the line so that we have more collateral without more investment type of thing.
Well, I mean, that's fascinating, Sloan, that point. So what you're saying in effect is the hard work and the heavy lifting that you're doing at the one-to-one level, which is obviously the higher investment for the greater return, higher levels of personalization as well. You're then looking at that content or that approach and you're saying, well, what can I take from here for a one to few play? Yeah. Is there any, I don't know, put you on the spot, but is there any example or any kind of hypothetical example you can share about how that works in practice?
Oh, we've had a couple of nice wins lately, and all right. So a hypothetical would be, what if you had historically done a marketing collateral piece that may go out through, say, some type of aggregator system, and you have always had it be very HTML heavy. So I think we know what we're talking about, right? We're talking about a nurture program without going into exactly what it is. So when we did A/B testing, because we have more of that freedom, we stripped out all of that HTML because we were finding that at C-suite levels, we were hitting firewalls and bouncing and getting no returns. Now we can sit here and we can talk about that we have over a 12% CTR on some campaigns. We have over a 5% open rate, a unique open rate on some campaigns. That makes some big, easy wins without that massive investment. And then on the other end of that, I can talk to you about how, yeah, we've actually taken some personalized collateral that we created on that one-to-one, and within less than probably 5 working days, we were able to strip out that personalization. By creating outcome-focused messaging that you looked at that audience level at, we were able to repurpose that for a completely separate campaign, broaden the scope of that audience, and successfully run that with both more of a lead gen as well as something that was like had a historical footprint but was not a one-to-one site. So like a one to few with a little bit of lead gen on the back end of it. So those are two fairly easy wins that I can sort of talk about.
No, a couple of good examples there, and that leads into a question I think about account selection. Obviously, as you mentioned, regionally in the Americas and obviously globally, you're running a one to one and a one to few play, a blended play, so to speak. What's your thinking around account selection? How do you approach it there at NTT Data? What goes through your minds when you're looking at why this account warrants a one to one play and why this account warrants a more, as you said, a more verticalized one to few play?
Yeah, so great question. I would say that when we do an account selection, and if I get choked up, I apologize. It's a very emotional part for me, which I love these accounts, especially on the one-to-one side. But For a one-to-one account, we definitely look at, there's a dollar amount, right? There's a pipeline amount of that type of situation. And, we take into account the idea of deal acceleration versus the one-to-one. So we do a hybrid mixture of those types of things. We look at ramp time. We look at existing footprint. We look at the relationship between the executive and the C-suite already existing. Like, do they know anybody? Is there, even if it's a sort of a formal relationship, is there at least something there? Um, and all of that said, those are all key important parts of it. And when you launch a program in this space of ABM, one of the key things, and I will die on this hill, is the account team. Right? They need to not just see the value, but they need to buy in. They need to want to be a part of it. And sometimes, that means us really, well, like our sort of informal and even our onboarding conversations are at least an hour to an hour and a half long with that team, because we want to make sure that we're doing a lot of things, but we're also, you're part of this community building this content for your audience, and you have to be willing to put that time in. So we're looking at the account team, we're looking at that revenue, we look at the pipeline, we look at what is coming up in the future as well. And we also take some risks, right? You got to be willing to sometimes try something that may not perfectly fit your model. Especially when something like NTT Data, we have so many different components and pieces that we offer across the IT spectrum. It sometimes makes it a little bit like, one day my audience might be a C-suite group. One day my audience might be a, very smaller, independent, locational offices that are scattered across the United States, that are not centralized at all. And therefore, you're not talking to your C-suite's already on board, but it's the region, it's those smaller shops that are actually deciding who they want to work with. So now I got to sort of change tacks and figure out how to target that audience without it feeling, too much like a directive, but more like a, hey, did you know type of situation. So
Yeah.
it keeps it fun, it keeps it interesting. But there's just a lot of different things that we always look at. I mean, and there's some hard qualifications, like deal accelerations lend themselves a little bit better towards new logo situations or new accounts, whereas we don't usually take on something we don't have an existing footprint to some degree, and there's not an opportunity for growth and share of wallet for the full one-to-one type of accounts that we do. And then one to few, again, not as many qualifiers, but we still have, we want pipeline, we want to see that there's an engaged audience, because, well, you might have more regular meetings with your one-to-one accounts that we like to do on our end. You probably are not going to be able to wrangle 15 client managers into a 30-minute meeting once a week, maybe once a month, but it's a little bit less of those touch points. So
Yeah, good points. So actually, there's something, Sloan, you just said there, which made me think. Actually, you've talked about about being emotional about some of your one-to-one accounts, and I think one thing you said to me when we were preparing and chatting before this recording, you said that you acted like or you felt like you were an embedded reporter within these one-to-one accounts, and that kind of really got my mind whirring about how these reporters really are become part of the team, or the military unit that they're embedded in, so to speak, a little bit kind of band of brothers. So just can you share a story or two about that kind of closeness that you achieve?
yeah, happy to. Like you said, it part of me is that mentality of wanting, in some part of my mind, to still be able to write and do that side of it. So I always go back to the reporting and the embedded type of sensation that you get. But you will find yourself being an advocate for your account teams. Like, I mean, I have gotten up at times and discussed at length that my marketing counterparts do not understand what the sales account teams, not just the sales managers, but the full account teams are being asked of, and what they're going through, and understanding their desire and their need. But beyond that, you create friendships, you create true caring relationships. We have one colleague that I have worked with probably since the inception of this program, and that person has had some recent health concerns, and we all come together and we're supportive of that person. And it's not, you pick up where the other person leaves off. You're there with them. You're invested with them. I mean, that client specifically, or that account specifically that we worked on, we were asked to come in and work on something in an area that we'd never been asked to work on before. I mean, that was a massive win that we had, and we celebrated like a team, even though all I was doing was creating that collateral and giving it to them to both hand out and driving audiences there through advertising and other components that we engage with around our one-to-one. But you truly do come to really care about them, and then you have these regular cadence with these accounts as well. So you will, you call them, you talk to them, when you're not at work, you talk to them, you have their cell phone numbers, and you might call them up just to see how they're doing that week. But it does create a true closeness in that relationship.
Yeah. And that leads me nicely to another question I wanted to ask you. Another thing you said to me, which kind of jumped out actually when you said it to me, hopefully I got this right, but you said all of my team have an agency background.
Mm-hmm.
And that you said that you feel that this is imperative because you have to be nimble. So tell me more about, obviously you're talking to me, I'm a CMO of an agency. So I know the kind of the DNA of the people who work with an agency, but what do you think makes a great ABMer, and what characteristics are you looking for when you're hiring?
Yeah. So everybody I work with, whether they all currently have at least a couple of years on the agency side. I probably have the most agency background experience, but I came up in an agency, and I started off working in agencies, and I always thought I would be an agency person. I never thought that I would be in-house for something like this. And so I was on the account management side of things. And when I look at the landscape of what ABM does, primarily because, you don't have a whole team of people that you start off going, you go in sort of either by yourself or maybe with one other person, you meet the account team and stuff like that, but you're forging that relationship the same way you would with a new client or new logo at an agency, right? You're having to figure out what works, what doesn't, what verbiage do they want to use. I mean, I know that, I talked about outcomes earlier, but before I started, we always on the marketing side use the term solutions. But you listen to the account team and you work with them, and you learn to adapt to that understanding of the term and the verbiage, and you have to be willing to do that, right? You can't sort of always want to be, you don't always want to come in and say, well, this is how it's done in marketing or something like that. And I think that in-house marketing people, maybe more so on the B2B side, are a little bit more rigid in that ability to adapt and do that. So you want people that are adaptable. You want people that are creative and wanting to learn. I think that's a lot of it. I mean, I can tell you that I have at least one horribly ridiculous idea a month. Whether that's the idea of creating, I like taco trucks at events for trade shows, because then you don't have to have as big of a booth at an event. Horrible ideas. Not in any way practical, but I will come up with them and throw them around, and we'll laugh about them. But you have to be at least wanting to try different things that nobody else does. And I don't see that. I see that with agency guys. I see that with the people that I've worked with in the creative space on advertising and other agencies. And that brings a certain amount of willingness to do that. So when I'm looking at who's going to be another good ABMer, I have those conversations with them. I kind of gauge them. I say, well, what's the most ridiculous thing that you've ever engaged in for a campaign? Like, what's the most sort of out there thing that you were super unqualified for, but you went out there and did it anyway? And just to see where they come up with an idea, what their thoughts are. And that will allow you that, because you'll get faced with things you don't expect, right? You'll go through changes within both the account or the account team, and or the client, or what the client's needs are, or what you're being asked of, whether that's you're going to an event that you're sponsoring, or you're creating a one-on-one, discussion interview, or you're producing a video for something. Those things change every day within that ABM space, whether it's one-to-one or one-to-few. And so being able to do that, which you can do from an agency side, is important. And the other part of that is the revenue feature. Like, marketing people tend to get lost in that tunnel vision of clicks, opens, and all of that. And we sometimes forget that at the end of the day, the account team you're working with on the ABM side really is focused on where they can make an impact on revenue or portfolio growth. And you have to be able to understand that as well, which it lends itself well to people who've done some form of sales at some point. And, a client manager in an agency at least knows the idea of having a number they have to hit, each quarter to keep the agency running.
Yeah, and the good points. I think just a couple of things you said there, actually. One, I think, is both the creativity. There's often that isn't necessarily normally in-house in a marketing department, and normally that's why advertising agencies over the last Mad Men, etc., have come into existence, because of the creatives needed for that. ABM also kind of there's such a great opportunity to be creative, because you've got to be creative with your customers, you've got to be creative with your prospects, with the market. And so trying to have, as you said, taco trucks at an event, I think it's a bloody marvelous idea, to be quite honest. So I think you'll probably get somebody stealing that idea, and when you go to the next Forrester event, you'll see a taco truck part there, and so you want to make sure you get some commission for that. But there's no such thing as a bad idea, and I think that's a marvelous approach. And I think what you also said about the commercial thing, that's interesting, because you are right that everyone owns a number in an agency, and that's a lot. They're a lot more hard nosed. And I think the third thing was also, I suppose, this idea of cross pollination. And I think what you were saying to me before, the way that you were all talking to each other across the globe, sharing ideas about the programs, and you telling people within the ABM team what programs you're running, what success you're having, that kind of cross-pollination of ideas. Sometimes if you're just working in a marketing lane, you won't necessarily get that. So I think you definitely get that from agency across to ABM. Just a couple of questions around the success of your program there, Sloan. What can you tell us about ROI? What can you tell us about results? First of all, I suppose you mentioned the 3 R's, reputation, relationships, and revenue, which is kind of a well-established methodology for measuring ABM. What can you tell us about results? What, if anything, can you share about the results you've had to date?
Yeah, I think you were talking with Terminus, and I think it was Miss Young, I believe her name was, and she was discussing the influenced versus your pipeline numbers of how you're measuring those types of things. Are you measuring it by and that is a hard thing to do. And I think at some point you have to realize there's going to be trade-offs. And it's like this with marketing across the board. I know that, we talk about, Bev created this concept of ABM in 2006 or so, but if you think about it, most people probably didn't hear about it until 2016. And now we're only another, dozen years or so past that to try and figure out where we're at with things. And so measuring that is always difficult. And I think you got to make that call, whether it's sourced or influenced. I think you're going to always have trouble making the argument that you're creating a sourced opportunity there. But we have a standardized process across all regions in the COE of how we identify and we look at our numbers. And, we primarily look at influence because we realize the reality is if we try to do it as sourced with the accounts that we're choosing, it's always going to be a battle to defend that number. And so to make our lives easier, we've kind of just gone with that encampment. But we also do different pieces where we look at the outcomes of the relationships that we're building as well, right? So that's an important part of everything, and you got to make sure that that becomes imperative when you're looking at all of those other pieces, because they weigh that amount. There's a weight to that when you're saying how much of an influence have we gotten from this sort of senior leader or member within the organization. That all being said, as far as our numbers go, to your point of that ABM works 100% of the time, we blew past our numbers this year by, almost close to double digits for some of our influence and or booked pipeline numbers. And so that makes a good showing as well, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're showcasing that. I think it's one of those things that it takes time to get that number correct. How weighted are you saying is an opportunity in your CRM 100% influenced by this, or is it really more, a 78 or 80% influenced by the work you're doing? I mean, very rarely are you going to get that nice win, where you're called in for an RFP to pitch on something that you were putting into your strategy that you had never been considered for before that. I mean, 2+ years in this role, and I've only had it happen twice. So it becomes one of those types of situations. So you do have to figure out a way to measure it, and there's 1,000 different ways. We are still trying to figure out the best way to do it to be the most accurate. But I think you have to accept, for the most part, at least on the one-to-one side, that it's primarily going to be you're looking at influence. And then if you're on the one-to-few side, if you had put in some of those opportunities or things like that were, you might be able to get away with an argument for some sort of sourced number, but I think it's still hard pressed currently.
Yeah. No, it's a fair point. And I think it's also, as you mentioned, it depends whether it's what's the objective. Is it client expansion, client repositioning? Are you new logo acquisition? There's, you've got to, it's horses for courses. You need to know what you're looking to measure. And I think the methodology, the 3 R's, reputation, relationships, and revenue, helps very much to kind of put a wireframe around that. Talking about results, one thing that I saw when I was doing some, a little bit of investigative work about yourself and NTT Data and your ABM program, was the fact that you'd won quite a few awards. So that can mean a lot to a lot of people, because it kind of shows that you're on the right track. It shows that that people are looking at what you're doing and they see excellence there. So tell us a little bit about, just give us an idea about what you've been winning, and obviously love to hear that.
Yeah, no. So we recently won an award for Forrester's for our ABM program, as well as market mix and B2B marketing. So it's amazingly reassuring to hear this from our peers, that what we're doing is being impactful and it's being noticeable. As far as how we do that, again, a lot of that is falling under the idea that we keep a consistency across all of our different regions, from that leadership of the CEO, from Rachel Bell, and then on top of that, I've mentioned it before. I've had a chance now to have 2 courses with the Inflexion group that all of us have gone through, so that we're all on the same page. We all have read Bev's books. If you want to have a fun time, you put me in a room with Dorothea, Bev Burgess, and a couple of other of those people, and have them try to teach me something, because I will debate them all day about it, because I have my own experiences, and I'm like, oh, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens? But a lot of the wins and awards that we've had are in very much directly related to the fact that we basically tried to follow that playbook. We've identified accounts, we've made those solutions, we've gotten Abhijit Dubey, the incoming global CEO, and the CEO of the Legacy Limited division of NTT Data. He has been a huge proponent of that. I mean, I talk about it at the smaller, like the account team level, but that senior engagement from that senior level, and that being able to be on board with it, being advocates for it, that also plays a huge part of us making it easier for us to do things, because it means that we can go out there, we can try things, we can sometimes make mistakes, and it doesn't cost us the farm, right? Because the worst thing is you want to try and create an ABM program where you never take a risk on something, and you never think, well, maybe this will work or not, because that will hamstring you every time to either playing it safe every time, or just making decisions that you're not truly vested in believing that they have that opportunity to succeed because you're just going off of somebody else's suggestion to you. So, but yeah, a lot of the awards that we have won, it does make us feel great. It's something we can all hang our hats on because we know we've worked really hard. And like for us in the region, we've had we're able to work very closely with all of our other regions across, not just the CEO, but we also meet with other like UK and Europe regularly. And the fact that we have this very, you know, happy, open, conversational relationship because we're all going through this process together and all learning together, has made it so that we want to shout it from the rooftops, the successes that we've had. And that makes it easy to also write these applications, which I'm sure you know can take, you know, a long time to do.
They can do. So on that note as well, congratulations, because they can be quite onerous to fill in. Let's just finish off then, Sloan, with a few rapid fire questions for the audience. Learning. What's been your greatest ABM learning? How would you summarize that?
I would say probably one of my greatest learnings. Again, it's the camaraderie. It's this willingness to be a team. It's the eagerness to get up in the morning and connect with both your peers and also your account teams, to move forward and to move forward in ways that make no sense. I mean, we talked about the taco truck. Another fun idea I had was a vertical sliding PDF. You know how hard it is when you come up with an idea that everybody's like, no, we do it horizontally, and everybody does it horizontally. Yeah, but what if we did it vertically? And being able to get and we're not just talking account team and COE and senior leadership, but I'm talking about our creative internal division, our web design team. Like all these people just sort of come along and they go, okay, let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do to make this happen. And we like it and we want to talk about it and we want to chase it. And I think that has been my greatest learning is that, you know, we all, and I know, like, I'm sure you've seen this before. We all know that marketing guy that will tell you, oh, well, sales only responds to spiffs or sales only responds to money. And, you know, every day I disprove that with any of the conversations I have with the account teams and between that and working with all of these other different groups, that's been amazing. So that's my biggest learning.
Moving on now, hardest part. What do you think is the hardest part of ABM?
It's losing. It's always I'm a highly competitive kid. I did high school sports. I did college sports. You lose, it crushes you every time. Like you have the biggest faith in the account team. They're the greatest group of people you've ever worked with, and everything goes wrong. You know, like the RFP doesn't go through. You don't get down selected. You do get down selected, but then you get told that you missed the mark. And then you have to move off of that account and you have to say, you know, we're going to, like, it's a hard conversation to have to tell somebody that you're going to have to move them from having this regular cadence and being part of this team and being with them to moving them back into sort of a one to few or something else and just going to monitor them for a while to see how they do. So I can talk about all the other things that are difficult to deal with, but really it is the losing.
That's an interesting. I don't think anyone's actually said that before. So that's a new one, actually. So we'll be interested to see what the feedback on that is. Misconception. Obviously, there's lots of misconceptions out there about ABM. Which one for you is the greatest misconception about ABM?
Oh, I'd say the investment. You know, I can talk about lots of money we've thrown at the one side for not just my ideas, but just for in general creating the vendors that we work with, like you said, the agencies, the creative agencies, and the other things that we work with to help build some of the framework that we build when we start onboarding and building the accounts. And so there's a lot of money that's spent, but depending on the size of the organization, ABM can be done by almost anybody nowadays. You have a lot of the tools. You may not have the termination. You may not have the best Google Analytics built platform for you or whatever, but you can still create a lot of those like one to few campaigns around different verticals and segment your audience based on even B2C, B2B, it doesn't matter. And people always think you're going to have to do all of this investment and stuff. You need leadership on board. You need buy-in from leadership. You need to have your CEO be behind you. You need to have, people believe in you, and, you start building it. And I think that that's probably the biggest misconception, is just how much investment is necessary. Because once you have a couple of those few one to few wins, it makes the argument for the one-to-ones or the more expensive things so much easier.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, Sloan. Final question for you, advice. What's that one piece of advice you would give anyone looking to start an ABM program, present an ABM program to their CEO? What's that one thing that you say, make sure you mention this, make sure you include this?
I don't know that I could say one thing. I would say two things. And the first thing is, make sure to understand that failure is part of the game. Not maybe failure, maybe you make the argument that you never failed, you just ran out of time. I think that's a quote from Michael Jordan or something like that I like to live by. I've never lost a game, I just ran out of time. But you have to understand that is a real thing here. And I mean, I can count on, out of the accounts that we have had, I can count on two hands the amount of failures that I've seen. And I think some of those failures are sometimes the better learning lessons in life than the wins are, because you win and you move on to the next thing. But when you fail, you have to do a post-mortem, and you kind of have to take a stock of that. The other thing is, the one thing you've got to have is you've got to have a good vision. You got to have that. You got to understand that this works. You got to understand that you're going towards something that has not been done primarily in the past, because you're going away from trying to get as many leads, top of funnel marketing, that like the lead gen guy has always done in the company. You're going down funnel, and you can't be afraid of that. But what you can say is, look, that down funnel opens you up to a whole opportunity or portfolio that you didn't have before. And now you can dig deep, you can create a relationship. And if times get hard, if you've got that stronger relationship with those accounts, that can see you through hard times in a medium-sized company more than, the amount of, pure leads you get at the top of the funnel. So.
Well, good advice to finish off with. Sloan, thank you so much for sharing your ABM journey with us today. And I wish you and the whole team there at NTT Data every success for the future. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.